Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, the regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me this afternoon, we have Jillian DelSignore, Head of Retail and Wealth Distribution Strategy at Nasdaq, Maxwell Nicholson, co-founder and CEO of Blossom, as well as Annika Ng, co-founder and COO of Blossom. And we're here to discuss transforming the retail investor identity and how Nasdaq partners with platforms like Blossom to support financial literacy. It is great to have everyone with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. And Jillian, if you could just explain your role within the Nasdaq ecosystem and how that fits into the broader investing landscape.
Absolutely, Jill. Thank you for having me here. It's such a pleasure. So I work within the Nasdaq index business, and as part of my team, we are working to help connect with the clients of our clients being ETF issuers around the world, and those clients being retail, which we're going to talk a lot about today, and financial advisors. And so while we're looking to educate on those ETF products and the investing landscape, more and more we're leaning into financial literacy and the importance of that as we're seeing an uptick in retail trading and the importance of providing education around financial literacy and being invested, as well as the products they can invest in as we think about engaging that market.
Right. And Max, give us an overview of where Blossom sits within the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Jill, and thanks for having us on. So Blossom is very much tied to this retail investor ecosystem as we see ourselves as the investing social network, specifically for retail investors. We started about 3.5 years ago at the height of the 2021 bull run. So we've been through the bear market of 2022, through the bull market of the last couple of years. But yeah, we've grown to now over 250,000 users. And what makes Blossom really distinct from other social networks like Twitter or Reddit is it's built on the concept of transparency. So users actually link their brokerages to the platform. We connect with Robinhood, Schwab, E-Trade, all the big brokerages in the US with over 2 billion in linked assets, which really drives much richer conversations in the community because people's profile is their actual portfolio. So everything's backed up by what people are actually holding. I'll let Annika share a little bit more about the story and the genesis behind Blossom, but that's a little bit of what we are at a high level.
Yeah, and Annika, it's interesting that there has been so many market events just in that 3.5 years since Blossom's inception. Tell us more about that, Annika. What was the genesis behind the idea?
Yeah, I love that we're talking about financial literacy this month because that's exactly what Blossom was built for. We started back, in 2020, 2021 when essentially the pandemic hit and we felt this massive shift in the investing world. Everything was going a little bit crazy for the first time in a while. And Max and I, we were chatting and Max was already kind of dabbling in the stock market. And I found myself as a beginner investor, not really knowing much about what was going on, despite coming from a very similar background to Max. We both went to business school, studied economics, that kind of thing. And it really boiled down to, why does he know so much more about investing than I do? And what we realize is that investing is inherently a social activity. And historically, when we talk about these investor identities, women like myself, we just haven't had the same social circles or communities where we can talk about investing and learn from one another. And not only that, but the current social landscape, such as online forums like Wall Street Bets on Reddit, which is a very popular one, they're not meant for beginners. They're very male-centric and just generally are very overwhelming to read. So yeah, that's how Blossom initially started. Max and I wanted to fix this problem for not just for women, but for all investors who really didn't feel included in these conversations.
And Jillian, what's so interesting is when you and I first started in the business, really your community was on the trading desk or on the trading floor. So I find it fascinating that the tools that are available to retail investors are more than we had on the desk. And I find that fascinating just from a technological perspective, how it's evolved so quick over the past 20 to 25 years. So when you think about transforming the investor identity and the increase in retail trading, particularly since 2020, tell us about some of the trends that you're recognizing through the work that you've done.
Absolutely. I think it's so indicative of what we're seeing with Gen Z, right? I think there's a level, Jill, to your point, 25 years ago, we didn't have the resources. There's a different level of transparency and comfort with transparency in the generations that have followed. And so we've done a couple of reports here at Nasdaq here recently. One of them is called The Ascension of Gen Z. And we've talked about this interest. We were talking earlier about the interest in ETFs. When markets are particularly volatile, ETFs tend to shine, volumes spike. And we're seeing that happen really since 2020, as they mentioned in terms of the inception of Blossom. We've really started to see an increase in retail trading volume in ETFs. They lend themselves to the retail trading platforms, which have continued to grow, and the ability to express views on the market, which we're seeing certainly. And if you take a sort of zero in for a minute on Gen Z, as Max and Annika just expressed, they're getting invested earlier. They're engaged earlier, younger, and they're staying engaged. You know, if you think about it, they really entered adulthood as these retail trading platforms were coming up online, and they're digital natives. It's the first generation that is truly a digital native. And so as we dove into this and did some surveying of Gen Z, half of their trades were actually ETFs. And 75% of them owned ETFs in their retirement accounts. And so they've largely been introduced to ETFs through these trading platforms. So it sort of all came together as one, and we're starting to see certainly volumes increase, trading increase, and they're seeking education, as we just heard, right? They're seeking education on these investments. How do they be more thoughtful about their investments? How do they learn more? And they're increasingly going to places like Reddit, YouTube, and now Blossom to get that. And I think what's really interesting is that we've seen this increase, which I think is from my seat indicates to me, yeah, this is fantastic. There's an increased level of engagement. We need to meet that with an increased level of education. And so that's really what we've been trying to do from my seat, is how do we sort of meet the investor where they are, providing resources and content in the way they want to be met, largely video and ultra short form content.
Right. And Max, what is Blossom doing to support financial literacy? Because to Jillian's point, there are a lot of sources out there, right? And it can be confusing, it can be overwhelming. How are you targeting that to support these efforts?
Yeah, well, drawing it back to this awesome report you folks put out, Jillian, the Transforming Investor Identity Report.
Yeah.
One of the things that really stood out to me is this sense of how important belonging is, and seeing yourself as having the identity as an investor. And one of the stats there was that, you know, people who talk about investing with other people are 2 times more likely to feel that sense of belonging. So of course, Jill, we have a lot of like actual direct educational resources on the platform. We have these Duolingo style lessons for investors, but I think just the nature of having an inclusive community for long-term investors, the most followed topic on Blossom is actually ETFs, Jillian. So we've built a community where I think people can feel that sense of belonging, which, you know, actually drives that education in some ways as much, if not more, than like direct educational content. So we see those 2 things as going really hand in hand. There's the resources there, whether it's from our videos, whether it's from the awesome Nasdaq education portal that we have in the app, but then there's also a community that you can learn with and together with, rather than just doing it all solo and on your own.
Yeah, and I think
so I would emphasize, if I may just provide, I would emphasize that actually really came through in the Gen Z study as well. Max, the study that Max mentioned was done by the Nasdaq Foundation in partnership with Commonwealth, which is a national nonprofit. But this idea of community and connection is really coming through in the way investors are looking to learn, not just from folks like Nasdaq, but from each other. And so we're certainly seeing that in sort of all the research that we have going across.
Yeah, which is actually a perfect segue. You must have read my mind, Jillian, because Annika, I wanted to touch on that as well, because you had mentioned, you know, why you started Blossom and the genesis behind that. And part of that included making it accessible for different groups such as women. But I think you're now identifying as an investor, and it's more holistic than just one, you know, derivative or different identity, but now it's holistically, you are an investor. To me, that suggests there's progress happening here.
Oh yeah, completely. I think like before, you know, when I was a new beginner investor, I didn't really know where to go to, and every time I would go to a different platform and try to learn something, it was just so overwhelming. And obviously we talk about, you know, like targeting women, and, you know, women are a very important group that need to be included in this conversation. But outside of that identity, it's just being an investor. What does that mean to you? And that means something different for everybody. And so we want to make sure everyone is a part of that conversation.
Yeah. So, Jillian, you had mentioned before, from Nasdaq's perspective, making it digestible and relatable, meeting investors halfway. What's Nasdaq Index doing to support financial literacy in a way that's accessible for everyone?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's been quite a journey for us over the last number of months as we've looked to digest the research that we're seeing to try to meet investors where they are, right? And it's clear that no matter what you're producing, it should be short form, and their preferences towards video. And so what we've done recently is launched a series of short form video series, as well as a series of, I call it ultra short form, we call them the note cards, the Nasdaq note cards. So the ultra short form content and video, I actually host a show called Talk Your Ticker, where we talk with our ETF issuers about a particular ticker that they may have in the market. Very quick, what is it? Where does it fit? How do investors use it to sort of meet that need from an education perspective? A series called the Nasdaq 100 and 100. So the Nasdaq 100 is clearly our flagship. How do you learn about it in 100 seconds? And so it's a regular recurring series with our research team. We have a pending series, a video series on ETF education, given the increase in ETF usage. And then the Nasdaq note card, you can actually find the Nasdaq note cards on the Blossom app in the Nasdaq Education Hub. They're a series of literal note cards. They look like virtual note cards that hit on financial literacy topics. So savings versus investing, adding a new dependent to the family, investing in yourself, balancing savings versus experiences. And then we have a new set, there's 10 of those. And we have 5 more coming out that are focused on investing. So what is an ETF? What is an index? What is beta? What is a bull market, bear market? So we're really looking to provide very digestible video, short form content to investors that they can feel more educated on how to get started. I think that's the key. What we found in transforming investor identity is once they're there, if they're supported with resources, they're more likely to stay there, and they're more likely to tell a friend that they're there and get them to invest. And so we hope to see this bit of a domino effect starting to hit through the content we're producing.
Which is so necessary because that heightened, one of the more heightened volatility days, I believe it was Monday, April 7th, 43% of the volume were ETFs. That's the second highest day since November 2008. And of course, that was a financial crisis. So this isn't even just a nice to have. It's necessary for institutions like NASDAQ and Blossom. It's almost incumbent on the industry to support these financial literacy efforts.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Maxwell. Sorry, I wasn't sure if it was more for Jillian or for me, but yeah, I agree. It's completely incumbent. And I think we were talking about before, like not all ETFs are created equal, right? There's sort of this notion on some social media where it's like, just buy and hold ETFs. But really, as the ETF space is evolving and developing, you have such a wide variety of ETFs, right? You have leveraged ETFs, you have asset allocation, index ETFs. So there's such a richness in the ETF industry that definitely you need education so people, understand, A, what products they're buying, B, what products are available. And even on the index side, right, Jillian, everyone knows the Nasdaq 100, but you folks have an incredible range of awesome indexes from, the AI index, the cybersecurity index. And so it's great. Like with Blossom, we try and build it in a way where it's like accessible for a complete beginner. So you can get your toes wet, but then there's such a richness and deepness to the amount that you can learn in the platform. But I 100% agree, Jill, and I'm sure Jillian, you would agree as well, that I think it's critical that education be a part of, every ETF provider, every brokerage, every, fintech like us. We're all, pushing the movement of helping people take investing into their own hands, make better investment decisions. And I think we're really just at the start of that movement. So it's really exciting.
So speaking of being at the start, Max and Annika, if you could follow up on Max's comments as well. When you think about going forward, Max, the technology is evolving so quick. Investor preferences evolve so quick. We're in a prolonged, environment of volatility at this point. What's next for Blossom as you think about the environment evolving?
Yeah, well, one of the big things we just added to the platform was cryptocurrencies, and we partner with a lot of awesome ETF providers that also use crypto ETFs. I know Jillian, that Nasdaq has an awesome crypto index with Hashdex, and so that's like one of the largest sort of new feature. But really, our primary focus is growth and growing in the U.S. market, expanding that community, and we try and grow in a really thoughtful way where we partner with specific creators who sort of share our mission and our values. And so that isn't as much of a product thing, but it's interesting with Blossom where the main product, most of the time on Blossom is spent on the feed. So our main product is actually the community and building the community in a thoughtful way. So like Annika said, it continues to be inclusive. It continues to be welcoming. That's actually our main focus right now, rather than some, I guess, new splashy feature of making sure that richness and belonging and community feel really continues in parallel to the growth that we're experiencing as a platform.
Right. And Annika, if you could follow up as well, where you see Blossom evolving.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but on the subject of being inclusive, we also want to expand, internationally. We're a Canadian company originally, and we kind of dominated the Canadian market, and it's been incredible to see that growth. And as Max said, we're kind of moving into the American market now. But not only that, we hope to go globally because, there's people all over the world who are interested in American stocks and Canadian stocks and, stocks and ETFs across the world. So that's definitely on the roadmap for us, and continuing down with our mission statement, which is to empower everyone to make better financial decisions, and that comes along with education. And Max kind of talked about this already, but we do these incredible campaigns with all these ETF providers, and it's just been so amazing to see how much they care about education as well. I think we did one recently with State Street, and it was literally so boiled down to a beginner level where it was like, what is the S&P 500? What is an ETF? And the thing is, like, some people genuinely don't know, and that's where they're starting at. And so we're happy to address those things. But then on the other end of that, it's like, as a more intermediate investor, some people want to know, what is a covered call? Like, what does it mean? What do those terms mean? And so we kind of address alongside these ETF providers every stage of the investor journey.
Yeah, and I think that's that shows the ethos of inclusivity at Blossom, recognizing that, I don't know how to budget yet, but I'm interested in investing. So let's start with savings and budgeting, and then investing and what a stock is. That's so important to the ethos of accessibility. So I commend Blossom for being, thoughtful about that. Jillian, to wrap up here, when you think about the partnership with Nasdaq and Blossom, and then your financial literacy initiatives in general, what's your outlook there?
Yeah, I mean, I've been just listening to the two of them talk, and I think their mission is so similar to Nasdaq, right? Advancing economic progress for all. I feel like we're so incredibly aligned. I had the opportunity and the real pleasure to moderate a panel internally for Nasdaq last week on financial literacy, and it was incredible. We had 1,000 people from around the world dialing in with just a list of questions that just seemed endless on how to think about investing, how to think about savings, how to think about the markets, and it's so clear that we have such an engaged group who are looking to be, if you're not already an investor, looking to become an investor and looking for this education. And so I think the partnership with Blossom is just on the front end. We just kicked off at the beginning of March. So I think we're really looking forward to continuing to help them grow their community through opportunities like this, Jill, with you, and also to continuing to provide them with the content to help them make better decisions as investors. And how do we meet them where they are? Max and Annika, they actually host in-person meetups. And so I know we've been able to participate in some of those as well. They really take us into the real world and meeting up with one another and really identifying as a community. So very anxious to help them grow the community and then provide that community with, I think, the resources that they need to be better with investing.
All right. Appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.